Hello, believers, and welcome along. Hope you're well, and the move into the new year hasn't been too much of a struggle for you. I'm in a popular budget supermarket, currently navigating the reduced to clear section. Lots on offer here. Why are you in a popular budget supermarket, Chris? Well, I like to keep things fresh, unlike the contents of this reduced to clear section. Actually, there's quite a couple of bargains in here. Reduced to clear pizza, some sprouts. I had a field day in this. What's been going on at this end? Been shouted at by a horse rider for being an irresponsible dog owner. Apologies to the other users of Yellow Craig's Beach for that minor infraction. I'm not apologising to the horse rider, really entitled. Almost like owning a horse exemplifies something in the British class system. Anyway, apologies to the dog as well for not putting him on the lead sooner. And apologies to you listeners for having taken up 20 seconds of your valuable listening time. Anyway, 2024, off to a great start. I'm getting some funny looks actually from the other customers of this supermarket. Best keep my voice down. I don't want to be seen as an inconsiderate shopper as well as an inconsiderate pet owner. On to today's guest. It's stand-up comic and viral sensation Matthew Highton. Matt has performed comedy all over the world. He's a member of the off-the-wall Weirdos comedy collective. You may have seen his very popular mashup videos where he splices together aspects of recent and retro popular culture. Really getting into Alan Yentop territory here, aren't I? He's also recently been hosting various panel events at comic conventions, which has brought him into contact with many of his heroes. We spoke about existential dread, tough decisions, burnout, dead dad chat, quite a bit of dead dad chat as well actually, and also chat about impending dadhood, and also we talked about season 1, episode 9 of the X-Files entitled Space. As always, if you like the show, do please like and subscribe and tell your friends, and drop me a line at believemepod@gmail.com. Anyway, without further ado, before I'm thrown out of the supermarket, here's Matt.
Already so serious. I'm happy. I'm old enough to get into this now. I mean, when you start doing something like comedy, for example, we started about the same time. I think your instinct is the same. Like, you don't get up on stage necessarily to have a career. Maybe that's where I went wrong. Maybe some people do, but I got on stage because I love being silly. I love making people laugh. Because my career, I feel, is split in my own mind. There's the part of me that wanted to be a comedian and become the sort of whoever, whatever, be on the shows and stuff. But my whole dream has always been to make a film. Right. Since I was a kid, that's all I've ever wanted to do. It's all I've ever loved is film. And it took me years and years and years to sort of lead myself back around to this path because I love doing comedy so much. And as you know from doing this, start doing things like the Edinburgh Fringe and stuff, and your whole year becomes about this one focus thing. It's only about sort of 2012, so after I've been doing comedy for maybe 3 years and it's starting to go well, that I start to loop back to those ideas of making little sketches, making shorts, and essentially learning everything that I learned at uni again, like filmmaking and stuff like that. Everything sort of shifts, and this is where I think focus shifts. 2012 to 2014, I have a lovely run of Edinburgh Fringes, and you kind of feel like, yeah, this is going right. This is going the way I want it. I quit my temp job in 2015 to go comedy full time, and that is the worst year of my life, I think.
Right, okay. So, I mean, how did it get to, what informed that decision? You just thought, right, I've had an absolute blinder in Edinburgh, and were you making money off gigs, and then you thought, I could sustain this, or was it kind of I'm going to give myself a sabbatical, things seem to be going really well, if I really put the time and effort into this, then it could be a career,
Yeah, kind of a bit of both. Edinburgh 2014 was a really nice show for me, and I decided to take that to Australia. Australia is a mix of Perth and Adelaide fringes. I decided not to do Melbourne on a lot of people's advice because no one's taken me out there.
Right.
Perth is great. I have a really good run. I kind of know enough people to get gigs. I make quite a lot of money, but the decision to quit temping comes like I'm miserable in my temp job, even though it's very cushy. I'm not making that much money, but comedy is starting to pay more. So I decide to go, right, that's a clean cut. I go out to Australia and I come back and I give it a go.
Mm.
And at first it's great, um, because I'm doing fringes. But when I get back into that sort of clubby comic world, like, and this is the biggest respect to anyone whose full-time job is stand-up. It's such a slog and it's such a different mechanism to have a consistent wage. And there's two reasons for that. The places that are paying our club gigs, I definitely am more of a fringe comic. And I
Mm.
don't believe in that real sort of wall between the two. I just think it's two very different things. I know fringe comics who literally their whole year is cycling from festival to festival and doing shows. I don't have the discipline for that. My life is too settled for that. So I focus on England and very quickly, yeah, just get schooled into that. I don't have that gag rate. I don't have that sort of thing. I'm still quite weird and surreal then, even though it's mellowing more. And it sort of like just really humbles me and it gets this point where I look at my what I'm owed and I look at what I've got in the bank. So I'm owed about 3 grand at one point,
Right.
but I'm getting paid that in like 50 quid here, 100 quid there.
Mm.
So I never really get to a point where I can pay my bills and stuff. It's a really awful year. My rent starts to slip, my bills start to slip. And I have this sort of absolute breakdown. It's on New Year's Eve of 2015, just completely break. My wife sits me down and says, "You can't sustain this." She
Mm.
said, "She said I'm not saying you're not good at this, but financially you can't sustain this. What do you want to do?" And I'm picking up little bits of temp work here and there, a week at a time, 2 weeks at a time to keep me going. But the money's awful. It's minimum wage. It's not sort of giving me anything. So she sits me down. I'll always remember this. And Katie is the person who changes my career and she changes my life and she changes my trajectory. Says, "You love film. You keep making films. People keep coming to you to make little silly things. Why don't you collate everything you're good at in that and focus on that?" So, first week of January, I've spent a good day crying and then sort of week just getting all my CV strong, leaning on my comedy credentials, leaning on any little bits of writing work I've had,
Mm.
leaning on any little bits of TV I've had, but mainly focusing on like the things that I've personally made. And I blanket email everyone I know in sort of the industry, all the contacts I've made. And the one thing that comes back and the one thing that changes my life is I get a job at the Beano.
Right. Yes. Right.
And the Beano is completely shifts everything. And this is probably a bit later. Like if I think about it, this is probably 2017 when I get this job. What that is, I get a 3 day a week job. I am making silly, funny stuff with lovely creative people. And we're doing end to end content. Content's becoming bigger and bigger at this point, obviously. It's not quite the machine it is now, but
When you say end to end, you mean like making the stuff and then putting it
everything.
out,
So,
right?
yeah, we sit down on a Monday, we write down all our ideas, and then by Monday afternoon or Tuesday, there's a small team of us who are either editing a video together from something online, or we are in a quote unquote studio, which is a room upstairs, dicking around, shooting stuff, editing it, and getting it out. So we've just come this really lovely machine. And like that team is incredible. Like there's so many talented people involved. But Lydia, who was our team leader, and John Ed, who's got a comedy background, they just really knew what was needed and what was wanted in the world, like what kids wanted, what
Yeah.
would do well. They won together for our team so many awards, and it sort of makes me realize, oh, I'm good at this. I can do this. So that becomes my income. And that income means I then fall in love with comedy again because I'm not chasing that money. But all the time, I'm still sort of, even though I'm working hard, I'm constantly working. And this is something I think everyone knows. You've always got this hope that someone's going to walk up to you and go, "Hey, you're doing all this. I'm going to just give you your dream now." And it's not the case.
Yeah.
So I'm always pitching, always gigging. And it's not that it goes bad, it just stays the same. It doesn't change. And that's partly because, again, I'm in a routine where everything's doing well enough, but I'm not at a point where, I'm in crisis or anything. So I sort of continue like that. The Beano, eventually we all get made redundant. And that's just a real lesson in the world of content of, yeah, everyone wants content, but you can't make that much money from that industry.
Where have, if you don't mind me just jumping in, where are these ideas coming from then? I mean, I know that's quite a nebulous question, but from when you did stand up through to the films you're making now, is it always a similar process? Are you walking around? Is it just stuff coming to you, or are you sat down with a pen and pad? And where's I don't know. When I think about you, I think about in the nicest possible way geek culture, nerd culture, popular culture, and all that sort of fed into your machine and then comes out in the stuff you make. But do you sit down and do a particular thing when you got a write or not?
It depends on how big the project is. So the biggest thing I learned from the Beano is write down every idea you've got and just start making it. So that comes from the privilege of time, though. Like, one of the biggest comments I get on videos is, "Oh my God, who has the time to do this?" For 2 years, I had the time to do this. It's like, it's as simple as that. But it becomes from like work ethic. So it depends how I look at something. So for a bigger idea like an Edinburgh show or a film or something, I need to really sit in my own head for a long time. Turns out my best mechanism is a steam room, a sauna, or a hot bath.
All right.
Just sitting there as hot as I can, and I wait for about 20 to 30 minutes, and then something happens where I'm so hot my brain snaps. And it's kind of like, in the wankiest sort of way of looking at it, it's like meditation. You just get a real free flow of thought. So if you're thinking about, say, what is the plot of this film, who's this characters, it's almost like watching it in little bites. So you just get little images, little snapshots. So I'll sit there for about 20 minutes till I'm close to dead, really dehydrated. I come out of either the bath or wherever, I grab my phone and I write down everything that is still in my head. And then I go back to it 24 hours later and see if anything is worth exploring. And then that way I will start hammering the process out that way. And that's how I wrote at least 3 or 4 of my Edinburgh shows. That's how I did a lot of shorts. With the content stuff, which is the stuff that I probably made my biggest sort of quote unquote following or name on, that's just from a good work ethic. That's just coming out of the Beano straight into the pandemic almost. And Katie, my wife, works very hard. She's got a proper job. During those awful early pandemic days, she's working upstairs. She's still doing a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday.
And she was in publicity, is that right?
Yeah, she's very good. She's in entertainment PR. She is incredibly hardworking and incredibly focused, whereas I am, she's on a meeting and I'm walking past in a wig. Like, it's a very sort of different jobs. But I just take everything I've learned from sort of doing those sort of real jobs, and I just go, right, if she's working, you're working. Like, you're not just going to now get through video games and films, which sometimes, you can't force creativity. It is good to shut your brain off. But on a Monday morning, every week of that pandemic, I wrote down every idea I had, every stupid thought. And then by Tuesday, I was making that. And it just became a content machine for myself. And things started to go viral because everyone's looking at the internet. So I go from about 3,000 followers on Twitter up to about 25,000 within the year, which isn't, huge numbers, but for me, it's massive. And suddenly people are looking at what I'm doing. And there's like, film directors I've loved for years sharing stuff. And like, it's quite exciting and stuff. But it makes me realize something about what I like, my taste, other people like. And I think that's if I ever said anything to anyone, if you're ever going to make anything in whatever creativity it is, whether it be like film, TV, comedy, baking, whatever, make something that a version of you would like. So I always think I'm playing to my teenage 20-year-old self, that sort of era. I'm like, I want to watch things. I want people to watch my things in the way that I discovered things. Like, again, first time I watched Space, or the first time I watched The Boosh, or the first time I watched Shaun of the Dead. I think you just got to trust that if you like it, someone else will. And that's the thing. And the hard thing is then finding your audience.
Yeah.
But there's also that feeling, which is like, when does that elevate? When does that become something bigger? Because it's very good sitting in your room making this stuff, but you got to pay your bills. You've got to do everything. Like, and yeah, you just sort of, then you go, what is it I actually want? And I look at a lot of the things I make, and I'm really proud of the things I make. And it learned me a lot of skills that got me a lot of real world work. So my videos going viral online got me other jobs, which has ultimately led to me making essentially a career out of content with a comedy background. And then now it's just like I look at all the stuff I made and I love it, but I also see it as junk food. It's stuff I'm putting
Right.
out fast for a quick hit. It's not something that I would ever think, oh, it's not the big shows I'm making, all this stuff. And all I ever really want to do is make a film.
And you've just done that, haven't you? Have you made a film now? Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
we did last year. But again, like I'm coming at that, I'm making that at 39 years old. You see kids doing it. And I think this is what you do. You're always playing against yourself. I think someone once said, you're always fighting a version of yourself in the past. So you're always like wondering, why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do that? Why I should have done this then? I should have done that. But you can't. Like, group of us got together and we just did it. And all this came off the back of my dad dying.
Yeah.
Genuinely, my dad dying flipped a switch in my brain that did that exactly what it did. You haven't got time to do anything. And I realized again, the same reason why I got on stage for the first time when I did comedy, it's the same reason why I made a film. It's not because I want a career out of this necessarily, even though I do, even though that is now I realize what I love. I love making films. I love putting things together. Like performance is just something I love doing. Film is something that I could live and breathe. Like it
Mm.
just putting images together and making a plot work. It was like becoming whole.
I was going to say, how did that affect you then, your dad dying? Because I know that you sort of had a.
Strained relationship.
Yeah, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I know from just our past conversation that it was a. I don't know if it was what the relationship was like, or if it got any more positive, later in life.
I come from a working class background. My dad more so than me. My dad was. My mum always said he's two people. He's like a Jekyll and Hyde, and the Hyde came from drink, and the Hyde part of him, which was there in the day as well, was jealous. It was insecure, but it was masked in this bravado. And my dad, he always, like my mum was talking about this the other day. When I started doing comedy, he was always a bit like, oh, why are you doing this? You're just going to look like an idiot. Like, is this actually what you're going to do? When I started doing well, he was always going, my son's a comedian. I think, I don't know where he gets it from. I don't know like how.
Mm.
So he only ever was interested when we're doing well. And that comes from his own insecurity. We had a good relationship and we had a terrible relationship. And that just, there's violence in our house. There was aggression. There's a lot of stuff. But that is what ultimately led me to, I think, being silly and funny as a kid because I wasn't sporty and I wasn't, didn't want to fight, even though I got in a few scraps when I was a kid. And so the thing that I did is I sharpened my tongue. So when my dad's getting angry, my brother used to fight him. And that's what my dad wanted on some level. He wanted someone to come at him. I think aggression was the only way he'd feel alive. Whereas I knew that making him feel little or silly would stop him because he felt embarrassed. So I learned to, one, sharpen my tongue in that way, and two, because I was the youngest, I was the one who had to diffuse the tension in the house.
Mm.
So that sort of led to that. And then, yeah, it's really hard because I think my brother does this a lot. My dad was a good dad when he was good, and he was a good person, and he was very loved. But he had these horrible holes in his personality. And so there was, when he died, resentment. And he died because he was an alcoholic. Like, and he'd always been an alcoholic, and it'd always been his problem. And it's really sad he only realized it towards the end. And it really messed us up. And it was a pandemic, so we couldn't really see him. And he was in hospital for ages, like 2 months. He didn't have any solids because his stomach was just fucked.
Mm.
And then, yeah, when he died, luckily I hammered out a lot of my issues on stage, and we talked about stuff through a lot of reasons as we did. So I didn't feel like there's anything hung over from it. but it did instantly do two things in my brain. I instantly wanted kids,
Right.
like within a week. And I've been on the fence all my life about it, and my wife had been on the fence about it. But something about losing him, and I'm 6.5 years older than my wife. Something in my brain went, if I live to my average age and she lives to her average age, that's 15 years where essentially there's no family. Even though she's got a sister and stuff, there's something comforting about going, I would love someone to be there in the world, even if, they don't see it, just knowing that someone's out there. And that was it. I wanted a kid. And then the other thing was Bryony Redman, best human in the world. It took me to Soho Theatre to try and take my mind off it. Because like for a month, the grief makes you mad. It feels like a year, but you are just swimming in emotion to emotion, second to second. And you realize from the inside, you think, oh, I'm doing quite well. I'm being quite cool. From the outside, you're mental. But everyone understands it's grief. So Bryony, being a good human, took me to Soho Theatre, and we were chatting about the big life stuff. She was asking how I was doing and stuff. And I said to her, and I remember this conversation today, I said, just made me realize, time is finite and you've got to do stuff that you want to do, and no one's going to come up to you and tell you you can do that. And she said, what is the one thing you want to do? And I said, all I've ever wanted to do is make a film. And she said, me too, let's do it. And that was it. And that was the thing. It wasn't going out there to make a film to make money. It wasn't going out there to change my career. It wasn't going out there to do anything other than when I'm on my deathbed and I look back, I've done the one thing that I wanted to do. And I've done it with friends. And whatever people think of it, whatever people make of it, I love it. And I'm so proud of it. And it's there.
I can certainly identify with that experience of having a parent die and then just feeling like, well, there's literally no time like the present, and you just need to get on and do your thing and not ask permission from anyone. And, no one's looking over you. I know, like, the comedy world is a unique sort of place, but and everybody's looking at each other on social media, but no one's going, well, you can't do that, mate, or you need my permission to do that. So I think it's good to hear that you've had that there's a positive come out of that, and it's kind of pushed you into, something that you wanted to do for a long time. So it's in post-production now, is it?
Yeah, we're nearly done. Like, we shot it last year, and I can't say much about it at the moment because we're keeping everything close to our chest. But yeah, it was very budget, very fun to make, and it's just what I hope is we've done a lot with very little, and I hope people see that and people like it. But like going back to grief and stuff, because I think you all, like, say, I know you've been through similar circumstances. There is something to be said, isn't there, about having a parent die. It's weird, isn't it? The only thing I could ever compare it to is I remember when people started losing their virginity at school.
Right.
What happened is people who lost their virginity would suddenly be friends with people they weren't really friends with because they'd done exactly the same.
Right.
And it was just to talk and compare and sort of check that you will experience something as normal. I think grief does that. Yeah. And what's incredible about grief is it gives you for a very small window in time, you have pinpoint focus on the things that are important to you. It's like having a near-death experience in terms of you are suddenly like, what do I want on this planet? And I think it's, in terms of creativity, I've always found bad emotion to be a good motivator. I think, like, emotion needs to be processed no matter what it is. So, I've wrote shows off the back of breakups. I've wrote them off the back of grief. And it might not be healthy for those around me, but I think people who have creative juices, it's got to go in and it's got to come out somehow.
Yeah, I always said that, like, I felt like anger, which is obviously one of the stages of grief, is such a powerful, unique emotion that if it's channeled, is really therapeutic and also productive, can be a productive. It's partly one of the reasons I don't really listen to indie music anymore. I'd rather just listen to metal because I'd rather feel, angry and then do something with that than I would, be in my own head and just feel, I don't know, there's a whole gamut of what indie music is. And I don't even know what indie music is anymore, but
I have discovered my genre now is old man with regret.
Oh, I love it.
That's it. Like that's sort of like Johnny Cash is the ultimate, hurt. Like that sort of feeling of
Again, but I suppose time's passed, for these
yeah.
people. Yeah. So when's the baby coming then?
We're 8.5 weeks off now.
Oh,
We got a little stinky boy coming.
boy,
Um,
right.
yeah, yeah. Very excited. I mean, again, like I said, I knew for years I wasn't sure, and I thought I was going to miss the boat. And again, that comes from one Katie being the same, but from a personal level, I was always bouncing back and forth the idea. But I think I was always waiting for my career to take off and be stable financially, and
Mm.
it just didn't happen in the way I thought it was. And again, this is something I think if anyone's got this far, then they're invested. Um, if you are doing this sort of stuff, like stability is the enemy. That's how it feels. But you and me are similar in terms of we've never had any other option other than having to work. There's a lot of
Mm.
people in this industry, and it is awful. And most of them are lovely, but there's a lot of people in TV. There's a lot of people in comedy who, if they stop working tomorrow, they wouldn't be in trouble within a month.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Me and Katie, there's and I know other people use this, but we have a saying in our relationship, which is she's the pension, I'm the lottery ticket. So like,
I've never heard that, but I absolutely love it.
she has kept me buoyant for many years when I have been largely unstable. So she's the one who will get the big shots in. If we go somewhere, she's the one who's likely to pay for the meal.
Sure.
Like, this is the problem with creativity. I think acting is worse. It's such a hard thing to get into. You need a financial base.
Yeah.
So you're already losing a race in some ways where a lot of people they can't support it. I mean, the Edinburgh Fringe is a great example. There's very few working class voices up there now, just because it's obscene to get into, and that is no discredit to anyone because I think anyone who's made it in this industry or any industry, on a whole, 99% of them are there because of either talent or hard work, or usually a combination of both.
Mm.
What's the horrible thing about any creative industry is TV, film, comedy, whatever, is there's so many people who are consistently good or great at it who are just working away
Yeah.
and they might never get the fame. What's really interesting about the last few years is obviously for us, been an absolute awakening where everyone's putting themselves online now and you realize, oh, everyone's funny, everyone's creative, everyone's stupid. It's just no one had that sort of drive to go, you know what? I think people would want to listen to me. I
Mm.
think it's a really nice thing to watch this sort of world be turned upside down and everything suddenly not knowing what's happening because there's just this dearth of unique voices and stuff. And I think the next 10 years are going to be very interesting.
Yes, because I guess the like technology now has also
Oh, it's
in one
mad.
way democratized filmmaking. I was when you said about growing up, I was thinking about my own experiences. Like, it's so difficult to get hold of a camera, or
It's always that mentality of, oh, someone else does that.
mm,
Also, like me and my friends, we borrowed a VHS top loader camera from my uncle. We used to make sketch shows.
yeah,
Awful, awful sketch shows, but very funny to us. And none of us could edit. You'd literally stop the tape and then do a take.
mm,
If you fucked it up, you'd have to rewind it and get to the point where you're live putting it together. Kids now, like in the best way, they've got a whole film studio in their pocket.
yeah,
The stuff that a camera can film now is better than professional gear 15 years ago.
yeah,
Like,
definitely,
and this is the beautiful thing. This is again like we're in a stage where gatekeeping is changing. Like you've done this. Like we've worked in industries where you've wrote a script or you've pitched something and then it's tied up for 2 to 4 years and nothing ever happens at the end of it. Right now, you can literally, worst case, the Werner Herzog method. You need someone to point the camera and someone
yeah,
to make the sound clear,
yeah,
and you can within a week have like a sitcom pilot. That at the end of it, the worst case is you put it online, and then maybe it finds a life online, and then maybe people want more of it. So you suddenly like you're seeing people. Podcasts are amazing. Like you're seeing whole people creating companies and industries off the back of. I need to put in very little money comparative to what it used to be, and hopefully I'll find my people. So yeah.
yeah. That's great. I mean, so the boy's coming in 8 weeks, and I mean, how are you feeling about it? Are you feeling nervous about it? Or
Feeling good. There's those images, aren't there? That again, how old are your kids now?
7 and 4.
Yeah, crazy. That's flown by.
Yeah.
But again, you'll now be like an old hat at it. But I feel really comfortable with it.
Mm.
The two things that stick in my head is that permanence. Like it's not like going on a sort of gap year and then you come back and you reset your life. They're there
Yeah.
forever.
Yeah.
And I love that, but it terrifies me in that sort of way that, you know, that realization in your sort of early mid 20s when you realize your parents are humans, that's quite shocking. But then to get to that stage where you're becoming the parent, you're going, I'm no more together than I was then. Like the fact that you're still discovering life and and even though you are more confident and more settled, that sort of permanence scares me. The image that I find mind blowing is that at some point in about 8.5 weeks, we're going to be walking out the hospital with a little human in a basket, and they just give you that baby and go,
They do, mate. Yeah, and it's like, what the hell do I do with this thing now?
yeah,
And I always remember a friend of mine had got a dog. They just got a dog, and he said, "Oh well, I'm looking forward to having this dog because it's a bit like having a kid, isn't it?" And I was like, "No, mate, because if that dog dies, you're not going to jail." For the rest of your life. So it's a totally different thing. But it's what do? You just stare at this child, make sure it's breathing every 10 seconds, make sure it's fed, and then it's like no one tells you how to do it. There's books, obviously, but I always feel like it's like when you start driving, no one can really tell you how to drive,
yeah.
or be a plumber. It's a life skill that you just got to do. You just got to do it, and then you cock up, and then you hopefully don't
10,000 hours, isn't it, mate?
That's it. Yeah, don't make the same mistakes as you see in other people. And obviously, you're going to be the best parent because you always think you are the best parent. So,
but this, I think, with anything, it's just consistency, isn't it? I hate that. I don't hate it. It's very nice. But when someone comes up to you and goes like, "Oh, you'll be a great dad," or "You'll be a great mum," I think don't say that, because all you need to be is consistently fine.
sure.
Because you are going to make mistakes. You're going to be tired. You're going to things will go wrong. There'll be situations when they're older, which are impossible, where whatever decision you make is going to imprint and affect them for the rest of their lives. There's no winning formula to this. The best thing you can do is hope at the end of it, you've got someone who is quite content and balanced. And I think that's all you can do. And hopefully, there's no thing. But also, parents, talk about the weird stuff more, which no one talks about. Like 2,000 nappies the first year. That's an awful statistic.
Yeah.
Worst thing I learned this week. The umbilical cord is going to stick on them for 7 weeks, like a little nub. Sorry, 7 days, like a little nubbin.
Yeah.
That's the most disgusting thing anyone's ever told me.
Are you going to eat the placenta and all that game?
Absolutely not. We are going to probably donate it so people can use the cells for research and stuff.
Very, very, very good of you. That's good.
But yeah, oh god, it's grim.
Well, I wish you well.
But it's exciting. I can't wait. I really can't wait. And I'm going to be tired. And this is the other thing. All that time that I don't think I've got now, it's going to be like a golden era.
Yeah, but it's in the same way as your other life experiences have focused your mind. This does focus your mind, and you think any time I've got, I'm going to use it to its full capacity. I know it's difficult to sort of, if you sit down in a room and then you must write, or the pressure of doing that, but it does tend to focus your mind a little bit. And also, they're not like kids, they're not like a thing on their own. They just come with you. We took ours to Russia when he was like 2. So they just come with you, and you just accommodate them, and that's the best way. Well, I think it's the best way anyway, because it's sort of part of your life, and they're just learning stuff and around you.
But again, I'm a big believer in you don't need to move to the country and all that stuff. I think life is everywhere, and the more interesting life is, the more they're going to be equipped with when they are at a stage where they're making their own way in the world. I think expose them to everything, be open about everything. And then again, as long as they don't murder anyone, you've done well. This is going to age badly in 18 years, isn't it?
Well,
Serial killer, young Highton.
yeah. I mean, are you a fan? I presume you're a
I
fan.
love it. I started rewatching it last year. So when you said the episode, I was like, great, I don't have to rewatch that because it's still quite fresh in my mind.
Nice,
Yeah, yeah.
nice.
Yeah, it's one of the most formative shows of my entire being. I'm one of those kids who likes spooky stuff. I'm a weird kid who's drawing monsters all the time. I've been obsessed with monsters and ghosts since I was a kid.
Do you believe in it though? Do you really believe in it, or you
No,
think
no, no. I think like I'm very scientific about ghosts and stuff. When I was a kid, I generally believed in it, like without question. And the best thing that could ever happen to me would be I wake up and one of these experiences. But obviously, as you get older and more analytical and skeptic, you can. But I mean, like in terms of aliens and stuff, like I'm not. I think it's very unlikely, but I'm also like generally believe there's life out there. I do believe that bleak. I can't remember what it's called. That bleak theory that the reason we haven't contacted aliens is because all civilizations come to a point where it eliminates itself. So we don't get to a point where we can explore the world. There's a term for it. It's completely escaped me.
right? Okay.
But it's a big scientific like thing. But like the idea that UFOs and stuff, I think, yeah, I don't think if there is life that can travel in an interstellar way, they are so much more advanced than we can possibly know that we can't understand it or we won't recognize it. Like, because we can only ever think in terms of what we know. So when you look at an alien, they're always bipedals, they're always essentially human
Hmm.
in some sort of abstract way. We don't know what would have formed out there. We don't understand half the universe. A big reader on the fact that we don't even know if we perceive the universe correctly or if it's a byproduct of consciousness, all that stuff. There's so
Right.
much weird leaps and bounds coming in science and quantum and all that stuff. Well, all I believe is what you can see in front of your two eyes.
Hmm.
And that whole conspiracy about covering stuff up, I can't understand why or how that would happen because I've been in a room with five people who have a secret. And by the end of a month, one or two have already like leaks get out.
Right.
There's absolutely no way you could. When people go on about global conspiracies and think about people in rooms, people are idiots. No matter what level of clearance they are human,
Hmm.
and it's impossible, especially in this day and age. And maybe yeah, there's something in the sky, but yeah.
I guess were you more into the alien stuff though? Because most people I speak to for this were
No, the
like,
ghost stuff. I love supernatural stuff. So the alien stuff was probably my least favorite bit, which
yeah,
is why the episode we're going to talk about, which is space, is a really. I think it's one of the most unique X Files episodes ever because it's one of the few times it's not only aliens, it's the ghost of an alien,
yes,
which is a
yes,
really first season flex of like we are going to make this weird. There are some really odd choices in that first season. I can't remember what the episode's called, but there's one where I think it's Ghost in the Machine. I think that's what it's called.
sure,
Where
yep.
it's basically Hal from 2001, but in a complex. There's some really of its time, like they're being really experimental. They're still learning the characters, and this episode is just it's bizarre, and I think it's because they'd found that face on Mars or something around the time.
That's right. Yeah. So this season one, episode 9 we're watching. This is they've just called it Space. So they've obviously a working title. They just call it Space. And the general idea with this one is that it's that face that they've seen on Mars. So it's a rock formation that's been photographed and photographed from about 2 miles above Mars. It looks like a face. And the episode starts with there's a lot of stock news footage in this to try and keep costs down. But, as we go on talking
Oh,
more.
they use so much stock in the X Files.
Yeah.
They remastered it not that long ago because when it jumped on Prime, I think it was
Mm,
on Prime, a lot of people were like, I swear to God, this used to be 4:3, but it's 16:9. And it
right.
was 4:3 on TV, but they shot it on 35mm film. So they did a remaster a few years ago where they had 99%, like 99.9% of the footage was kept by Fox. So they only did it HD. They didn't do a 4K remaster. And they digitally scanned all the stock, all the footage. They managed to essentially reframe it all so it looks like modern. So they put it into a 6:9 format.
Yeah.
This episode is what made me find this out, because the effects in this are terrible.
Yeah.
But everything else looked great.
Yeah.
And what it is they had to, varying degrees, try and upscale the VFX. But the VFX, that we're talking old TV, so they are low res. They've been done for 4:3 because they've been looking at what the TV is. So they had to try and recreate a few of them, but most of them they just had to upscale. So whenever you see an effect on the now remastered version, I think quite often it looks shitter because they can't scale it right.
Totally agree, because I just watched that one called Gender Bender last night, which I was very apprehensive about watching. It's about a serial killer from a kind of Amish style community who swaps from male to female. And
classic 90s.
Yeah, but I was really worried about it going in, and it's held up okay.
Yeah.
But it's like you say, the shots, the way it's shot is great, really shadowy. It's like a Fincher film or something. But then when you get to that effect, there's one special effect in it, visual effect in it, sorry. And it just looks really laugh out loud dog shit, It's just such a shame because they've done so well with the rest of the episode.
But that's because of the upscale. If you watch that in the original, like if you watch that on TV, it would all look of a similar quality. I mean, the effects are like incredibly and again, this is where editing for years has come in. There's effects on there that I could do better now. In my, at my desktop, just because digital effects are only just going into TV around this time. Like we're coming off the back of Jurassic Park by about 2 years, which is, quote unquote, the dawn of proper CGI. That's what I always think special effects and visual effects changed around Jurassic Park. So like X-Files and then later Buffy and shows like that, they are so ahead of the curve because they are taking they don't have the budgets they had today. They got massive budgets because it's Fox, but they've got to use it sparingly. Chatting to Diana Lee Internato because I was hosting Comic-Con 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Wasn't just I was just chatting to her, but she is in The Mandalorian, but she's also directed episodes of them and stuff and for other stuff. But she was telling me, even today, you get told you're allowed this many visual effects in most average shows. But most of the time that gets moved or changed depending on what you need after you shot. But you're supposed to go in there with the mind of this is how many visual effects are going to be in this. Right. And that has always been the case, especially back in the day where, you were pushing the limits. But if you look at the X-Files, especially the early seasons, one of the things they were really clever about was they wanted these huge sort of ideas, but there was only so much they could do.
Yeah.
And they get very clever with it. Like there's the episode where Mulder and Scully go and investigate people dying in the woods. It turns out to be aliens and time's freezing and stuff. It's a very early episode, but you never see the UFO. They do it with lights.
Yes.
If the X-Files did anything for the world, they got a generation interested in torches. That was their biggest thing. But they're very clever with using lights and stuff. So what you actually remember is a UFO, but what you actually saw was a light, which again, it probably is a good way to look at it in real life. What you remember.
Yeah, it totally plays into the sort of mythology of the whole thing, doesn't it?
Yeah, but I mean, they get better with it. But when they use it, some of the images that stick with me forever, like Tombs is obviously the one we all remember of him stretching. There's that episode where the shadow essentially absorbs people and kills them. They're very good at using effects sparingly. And ultimately what they've done is they've paved the way for shows like Buffy that come later that know there's an interest in supernatural stuff. But you're leading up to, these are some of the shows that lead up to later. HBO has The Sopranos.
Yeah.
The Sopranos is basically the first one that starts to go, and now TV is film.
Yeah.
And it's because of stuff like the X-Files.
Totally prestige stuff. And I think that's also largely due to the creative team behind this, and not just Chris Carter, but the directors that they were getting on for each episode. Really good. So that David Nutter, Rob Bowman, and this one's directed by William A. Graham. He's a really prolific TV director and actually directed Elvis's last film. Was that called Change of Habit with Elvis and a load of nuns, cleverly.
That's amazing.
And the guest stars they get, just second to none. It's I thought Marshall Bell was in this one, so I was really excited to talk to you about
Yeah.
Marshall Bell, but he's not. He's in Fallen Angel. But you get some. I mean, you get Ed Lauter
Yeah.
in this, who's in like Death Wish 3 and Cujo and
Yeah.
Starship Troopers 2, and Susanna Thompson, who's in Malignant, and it's
But
great.
yeah, it's like a real. But they've come from that 80s style TV of like guest stars and stuff.
Yeah,
But they've gone concept, and this is what I love about the X Files. I think this is why it stands the test of time, even when tech looks awful or things date. They always go idea first, supported by characters. So they were really early onto that. Mulder's arc with his sister and like season arcs, which again gets perfected with Buffy. They really sort of come into big storytelling, but it's a creature of the week. So every week, you're going to be something, and like you take or leave some, but people forget you're watching this week by week. So
yeah. It's interesting what they do with like Mulder's character in this one as well, because in this particular episode, you get kind of an insight into Mulder being totally starstruck by NASA and astronauts, and that's nice. A sort of giddy school kid around this astronaut.
Again, like Mulder as a character, he would have grown up during the sort of golden era of space race.
Yeah.
So yeah, of course he is, and he's obsessed with space for his reasons. Like it's really good underpinning of a character. The thing that I always think about Mulder and Scully in this first season is, you guys are too young for this job.
Yes.
Like I remember them being adults, but now I look at them and go, why is someone giving this child a basement office and just essentially got to investigate weird stuff?
Yeah, totally hear that. Another few bits I really liked, sort of how vague a lot of the intentions of the guest stars in this episode was. Like, I couldn't really figure out what the ghost's objective was. It's just
this is the thing, is it? What's
he up to?
Is the ghost trying to keep people out of space? Like it's a really weird. It is generally it's one of the weirder. I think it's ranked quite low on IMDb.
Yeah,
because it is so like someone's just basically gone, all right, it's a ghost story in space, and then they've but they haven't got the budget to set it in space.
Yeah,
so it's all done from the viewpoint of ground control, where a guy is possessed by an alien because he was an astronaut. And it's so like
it's like so. What is his, like you say? What's his objective? Is his objective to sabotage his own space program? And then I couldn't really get my head around what this. Everybody keeps talking about this payload needs to be successfully deployed. It almost felt like a Nolan film. It's like, don't worry about that MacGuffin. It's just we need to deliver this payload. What is it? Never mind. Don't worry. Just get it delivered.
What's interesting about it is, and I don't think I assume this was again kind of the idea, but the whole episode feels like it's about PTSD, but they haven't got the sort of language to talk about it in there. So it's kind of is an interesting from that character point of view, which is an astronaut who ultimately had some sort of tragic occurrence or some sort of life-threatening occurrence in space, has now got PTSD but still works in NASA. That is a great jumping off point, because
they reference things like the Challenger disaster in this as well.
But yeah, it's interesting to see that again, that model of America of we'll just keep making it so people are bored of it.
Yes, right.
Sometimes interesting, because like the X-Files film, I remember being very disappointed in, but by that point, you understand all the characters' motivations, what they're about, what they want. What's interesting to see is, going back to that core dynamic in the first season is Mulder is a believer who has had an experience. Scully is a skeptic, but she has religious undertones to suggest she's suggestible to certain styles of belief. And it's really it's such a basic, buddy cop format that becomes so much bigger than it does, because it just hits the imaginations of people at the time. It's just perfect.
Yeah, I think it does on the whole hold up well, and it wears its influences on its sleeves in a way that I can sort of accept it a little bit more from the X-Files. I don't know if that's just me looking back with nostalgia.
Again, that's the 90s thing. If you look at directors and shows in the 90s, the referential culture we have today is like to the nth degree. But back then, you've got people like Tarantino coming up who's grown up on film, and like all these people coming in making stuff, they've grown up on film and TV. So they're putting their things. You've got your Raimis who, ripping posters to nod to its references. So it is the beginning of that sort of culture, which they never really had before. The 70s didn't really reference the 50s, but they understood the studio system and all that. So, you're coming into a real indie boom in TV and film. Like The Simpsons do it so well. The Simpsons changes everything. Like there's so many things I know because I learned it first as a Simpsons reference. Like there's so many times you'll watch a film and go, oh, that's what that joke's from and stuff. And that I think is a really 90s thing where reference culture. So when they do it, they do it subtle because it's not to this point. Whereas now we're third generation reference culture, which is where sometimes people are referencing stuff they don't even know what the reference is because it has been digested so many times. It's just become a trope. So it's interesting again to watch like that development of just culture.
Believe Me is written and edited by me, Chris Boyd, with production support from Steve Marshall. The music is by Johnny Boyle, and our logo is by Russ Brown. See you out there next time.